Well, let's get the ugly news about the political violence out of the way first, because we have to talk about it. I'm just going to vomit my take on it, and then you can argue. I would just like to say, if you're one of these people, and there's many in this country who watched that and was disappointed the president wasn't killed. See, they're laughing at that. You're not a good person, or a smart person, but definitely not a good person. I was reading this in your paper, interview with Governor Pritzker of Illinois, and they asked him, like, well, what does the next president have to be? And he said, good, decent, and kind, which who can disagree with that? And certainly Trump has often not been good, decent, or kind.
Right, but also...
But he's not Hitler.
You can't say that you are fighting for democracy or a believer in democracy and at the same time excuse political violence as a mechanism for political change. It's one or the other. And that's the essence of our system, that it gives us the opportunity to change things through the will of the people and not through the barrel of a gun. And people who don't get that don't understand the basis of the system they are supposedly championing.
But many people would say that you are imitating him. You, among all the people who may or may not be running, you're the one who kind of imitates his style with the trolling. You're suing Fox now, I understand. You're suing, that's
well,
right
we're
out
going
of the...
into discovery. Fox better look to settle right now or apologize for defamation. But
okay, but that sounds exactly like what he does. Suing media?
Different point. Well, then don't defame, don't lie. And, you know, Fox is a propaganda
but that does sound like him.
Cost estimates are in for California's high-speed rail project, and it is not cheap. A new business plan says the full Los Angeles to San Francisco route could top $125 billion. Despite that, project leaders say they're not hitting the brakes. Capitol correspondent Eitan Wallace has reaction from Sacramento.
California's high-speed rail project. It's set to one day connect Los Angeles and San Francisco and eventually San Diego and Sacramento. In this newly proposed business plan released this year, project leaders now estimate the LA to San Francisco segment of the project will cost about $126 billion, with service starting around 2040. The goal is to get the Bakersfield to Merced section of the project up and running earlier, no later than 2033. All of it part of what officials are calling their optimized plan, one that reduces the scope of the initial proposal. In the newest optimized plan, some segments will share tracks with systems like Metrolink, and the number of tunnels on the project will, at least for now, be scaled back. Officials believe those changes will help the project save money. Without those changes, they say the full Los Angeles to San Francisco plan could have cost as much as $231 billion. At Wednesday's High-Speed Rail Authority board meeting, project CEO Ian Chowdhury expressed optimism, saying track laying between Bakersfield and Merced is expected to begin by the end of the year. He also praised a funding plan approved by the Democratic supermajority legislature and Governor Gavin Newsom to provide $1 billion per year for the project through 2045.
It gives us stable footing to move forward on the projects that we have currently underway.
Republican State Senator Tony Strickland says the project is unaffordable, echoing criticism from President Donald Trump, who last year pulled $4 billion in federal funding for the project.
We can't continue to spend billions on billions on a project that everybody here knows in Sacramento will never be built as proposed to the people of California.
Let's be real for a second. This Bill Maher interview, which we're about to get into with Gavin Newsom, felt less like a friendly sit down and more like a preview of what a 2028 campaign could look like if Newsom tries to run on the California model. And the reason it matters is simple. California is not just some random state nobody pays attention to. The way I look at it is the way California goes, the rest of the country goes. California is huge. It has money, culture, tech, entertainment, agriculture, universities, ports, good weather, and a massive economy. So when Gavin Newsom talks about California, he wants people to see the shiny side. He wants people to think about Silicon Valley, Hollywood, venture capital, artificial intelligence, the Nobel Prize winners, and all the industries California leads in. But Bill Maher, who actually lives there, is basically saying, hold on, that sounds nice, but what about the rent? What about gas prices? What about taxes? What about homelessness? What about the high-speed rail project that keeps costing more and taking longer? What about people and businesses leaving because they feel priced out or fed up? That is the real tension here. It is the polished national pitch versus the frustrated local reality. And that is why this interview hits different, because Newsom is clearly trying to sound like a reasonable national Democrat, somebody who can say, I understand your concerns. I believe in common sense that California is still the future. But Maher is basically bringing the conversation back down to earth in a way. He is saying, okay, but if regular people cannot afford to live there, how strong is the model really? And before they even got into California, Maher pointed out a point about political violence that I think everyone should agree with, that you guys seen in the first clip. You cannot say you believe in democracy and excuse violence as a way and excuse violence as a way to get political change. That is not how our system works. In America, we argue, we vote, we organize, and we protest peacefully. And we use free speech, we use the courts, and we use elections. That is the point of the Constitution. That is the point of the system the founders built. You do not have to like a president, you do not have to like a governor, you do not have to like a candidate. But political violence is not a political argument. It is a breakdown of the system. And from my perspective, that part matters because if we're going to talk about constitutional rights, we have to talk about all of them honestly. The First Amendment protects speech. The Second Amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms. But none of that means people get to use violence to settle political disagreements. Rights come with responsibility. That should be basic. Then the interview shifts, right? And this is where the California record comes into focus. The high-speed rail, the cost of living, the homelessness issue, the cultural issues, the taxes, the billionaire tax, the whole package. And my view is this: if Gavin Newsom wants to sell himself as a national leader, then California becomes the product he has to defend. And if the product is expensive, delayed, hard to afford, and difficult to explain, people are going to start asking questions. That is not personal, that is accountability. So hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and I want you guys to check this out in regards to Bill Maher talking to Gavin Newsom about the railroad project that you guys seen in the second clip that I showed you so far, and the expense of how expensive it is.
The other side, what they're going to say, though, is,
Yeah.
but have you seen the stats from California?
Good.
What? Well,
Fourth largest economy. Let's go.
Well,
I'm
are they
ready.
going to say good about gas prices? Are they going to say good about how high the rents are?
Yeah.
People, so many people live. I mean, there's a whole litany. I mean, the train, Gavin.
Okay, the train.
You got to get rid of the train.
The train.
I say this as a friend. You got to let that train go. You got to let the train go. It's up to $231 billion.
No, it's not. That's
Yes.
just nonsense. It's not. We're doing a $119 million segment. We got it back on track. It goes back 3 administrations. I inherited a mess. We put it back on track. All the environmental work is behind us. We're actually laying the track. All the legal litigation, all the land issues are all behind us. We're actually making this project work. And so that's a fact. Now, on the issue of California,
Well, it's been a long time coming.
of course it has. And you can't make up for the past. I can only make up for my
Well, my thing is, this is where I feel like Bill Maher should have actually not let him just pull out all these accolades without questioning the simple fact that you're saying there's much success, but why isn't it done? Right? And the whole point is, if you're talking about it got back on track, then why was it off track in the first place? Right? And not to mention that the hospice fraud that's being passed, and they're talking about stopping the Nick Shirley Act they're trying to pass, which is stopping a journalist, an honest journalist who's just trying to ask questions just like regular everyday Americans and taxpayers, let alone Californians, and you're trying to stop the truth. So it begs the question for a lot of people that are saying, because it happens to be that there's happened to be a lot of agricultural talk and a lot of eco-friendly, eco-green, and I'm all for keeping the earth cleaner, as we should. The very earth and the very land that we live on, we only have one. But the simple fact is, how are you really upholding that standard if in the name of fraud, these long standout projects way before you're gone is continue to be delayed, let alone there's no transparent show for the product actually taking place to result in the things that you're saying that's supposed to be done or being done. There's no transparency, right? We just keep talking about the past and the present and the past and the present, and using the past as an excuse when it's beneficial to you, that convinces others that you have been through all these hurdles, but in the same face, you throw in our face how successful California is. So it's confusing because we don't see the end result to ever be nowhere near, because the railroad project was on track, off track, on track. So it begs the question, if it keeps being on and off track, but there's no consistency to yield the results of the railroad project being ever complete, as you feel Bill Maher is saying, then why Bill Maher let him continue to throw accolades at him instead of staying on topic with the railroad project and how much money it's costing? Because all he did was deflect and start talking about successes but yet those successes has not been transparent enough for people to even see the results. That's why it's being questioned in the first place. With the hospice fraud, right? Trying to stop a journalist from just asking the truth and exposing that. It also begs the question, are we really standing for upholding agriculture and also going to the simple fact of maintaining the earth and the cleanliness for all individuals, let alone all the resources and things that Californians have? Because to preserve that, we have to take care of our earth, and we only have one land, like I mentioned. But it also begs the question, if you can take advantage of the elderly within hospice fraud in California, are you taking advantage of using the motive that you're trying to make California better and uphold the cleanliness and also take mind to agriculture? But are you using this railroad project in the long haul to funnel monies to be stretched thin to then benefit you in the name of fraud as well? Right? Because why is these projects being stretched out so long where there happens to be no result, even till up until you're out of office? So is it a money line? Is it a money laundering thing? Is it a money line thing project? Or is it actually a project that you actually want to see results in to show the American people, let alone Californians, who are funneling this thing? Because it happens to be with hospice care, the elderly need help, right? The most vulnerable, the individuals who have worked in the workforce, were productive American citizens, and they just happen to hit a hurdle in their life that they couldn't control, and now we give back. And there's nothing wrong with Americans. We all want to help each other, but it's the matter of seeing the results and actually it being taking place responsibly. Nothing wrong with taking care of our elderly. Nothing wrong with taking care of our earth, right? But the simple fact is it consistently being shown results and actually our money's being put to work, let alone being a stretched out railroad project that may be susceptible, allegedly, a scheme instead of an actual thing that is being upheld to be a money lifeline. So I wish Bill Maher would have not just let him throw accolades but stayed to the topic.
My segment, literally and figuratively, as governor over the last 7 years. But look, you talk about California, we're the envy of the world. Since I've been governor, no other developed nation has outperformed our economy. No other state has outperformed the economy of state of California.
I think people feel that
They may not feel that in every way, shape, or form, but we dominate in every key industry. We dominate in manufacturing, agriculture, hunting jobs, forestry jobs, more scientists, more Nobel laureates, more researchers, more the higher system of higher education, the finest in the world, more venture capital. You talk about the future, you're talking about California and AI and quantum, on fusion, on space. California is dominant. We also have seen the last 3 years population growth. We've got to update our talking points. We've seen a 9% decline in unsheltered homelessness. We've got to update our talking points. We've seen a 60% increase in permits for housing. We've got to update talking points. I'm very proud of the state of California.
Update our talking points. Why can't it just be critical thinking? Here's what this actually looks like in real life. Imagine a guy selling you a car and he keeps telling you how great the brand is. He says the company is famous, the design is beautiful, the engine has potential, the technology is advanced, and the future is bright. But when you walk around the car and the tires are worn down, the check engine light is on, the payment is too high, and the delivery date keeps getting pushed back, at some point you're not being negative about asking questions. You're being responsible. This is what the California debate feels like. Newsom is pointing to the brand. Bill Maher is pointing to the bill. Take the high-speed railroad project. In theory, a modern train system connecting major parts of California sounds great. I do not think most people are against infrastructure. Roads matter, bridges matter, airports matter, ports matter. Trains can matter too. The problem is not the idea of building things. The problem is what happens when government promises one thing and spends a mountain of money, takes years and years, scales back the original plan, and then tells taxpayers, stay patient. Based on the numbers being discussed around the project, Newsom is talking about a version around $120 billion, while other estimates for the full Los Angeles to San Francisco route have been reported much higher, up to around $231 billion, under a less optimized plan. The Central Valley starter section from Merced to Bakersfield is being discussed as a project that can cost tens of billions by itself and may not run into the 2030s. Think about that in normal human terms. If your city told you they were going to build a bridge and years later the cost has exploded, the schedule had moved way out, and the final version was smaller than promised, you would ask what happened? Where's the money? Right? That is not anti-train. That is pro-accountability. And that is why Bill Maher says basically you might need to let the train go. Because potentially the train has become a symbol. It is not just about transportation anymore. It represents a bigger concern that California government is very good at announcing big visions and not always good at delivering clean results on time and on budget. And he's talking about how great and we need to focus not on the past and only could do so much, those things happen in the past, but talk about now. But yeah, you're talking about the past of manufacturing and AI when you basically drove out companies like Tesla and so forth because you taxed them to death, where now you put Californians jobs at risk because the wealthy and the rich took their businesses and went elsewhere because you taxed them to death. So at a point in time, you're talking about the past when it's beneficial of how successful and bragging about California, but you're not talking about the end results of Democrat-led policy decisions on your behalf. Newsom's defense is that he inherited a mess and that the old environmental reviews and lawsuits are mostly behind him and that he's trying to move the project forward. Fine. That may be his argument, but I just told you why it seems very illegitimate. But from a taxpayer perspective, the question is still simple. How much does this cost? When will it actually work? And who is responsible if it does not? If you don't show the people or show the work, people question the answer. Then you have the population issue. Newsom says people need to update their talking points because California has seen population growth again. But here's where people get frustrated because the details matter. If the state grows because of births and international migration while still losing large numbers of residents to other states, that tells you a more complicated story. The number being discussed show California growing by about 108,000 people in 2024, but also losing hundreds of thousands in net domestic migration around the same period. That means people are still leaving for places like Texas, Florida, Nevada, Arizona, and other low-cost states. So when Newsom says update your talking points, a lot of people hear that and say, wait a minute. I know families who left. I know businesses that moved. I know people who wanted to stay but could not afford it. And that matters because politics is not just statistics. Politics is lived experience. If your friend left California because rent was too high, a statewide growth number does not erase that. If your business left because taxes and regulations were too heavy, a press release does not erase that. If your child moved out of state because buying a home felt like impossible, a talking point does not erase that. So basically, you're basically saying update the talking points to what I want to hear because the simple fact is I don't want to hear the truth. Then there's homelessness, right? Newsom points to improvement in unsheltered homelessness in some areas. Oh, you don't believe me? Let's check it out, family.
I want to read a statement I read. Remember Barney Frank? He's ailing. I wanted to say, if he's watching, we love you. I used to always say he's my favorite congressman.
Yeah.
He was my favorite.
Yeah. Legend.
He said, his statement, Democrats have embraced an agenda that goes beyond what's politically acceptable. What do you think he means by that? Do you think
I don't know. I think maybe talking about some of the things you've talked about for years and things that I've brought up as well as around being more culturally normal, which comes across for some very negatively.
What does that mean?
I understand. We have to, words matter. The way we talk about things matter. And getting stuck in identity politics
too, right?
I mean, some of the policies, not all.
Is there anything you're going to say California was too far left on? Because I feel like if you don't, I think a lot of the country is not going to listen.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that, I've said this in the past, things I could have done better, more. I look back at COVID. We just put out a detail, over 1,000 pages, what we did right and wrong during COVID as it relates to the issues of outdoor and beaches being shut down, schools being shut down for too long. But we also made the point we had a lower death rate than any other large state, that our economy recovered faster than any other large state, and we had one of the fastest vaccine rollouts in the country. So there's good and bad. And on the issue of housing and homelessness, what we could have done more aggressively sooner. But on social issues, where I think you tend to be leaning in towards, I've made my point of view known as it relates to issues issues of sports and transports, which I just think it's not being transphobic to be common sense. But I get how people are sensitive to that because that's been weaponized and people have been talked down to and the community's been abused by those that want to take advantage of this politically. So there's a sensitivity in all that. But look, if we're in the identity space, if we're fighting the last culture war, we're toast. And perhaps that's what Barney's referring to, and that's what you've been preaching and practicing, I think, appropriately for a long, long time.
Well, look, he points to improvement in the shelter, homelessness in some areas, and any real improvement should be acknowledged. Nobody should root against progress, but California still has a massive homelessness problem, and people can see it. You don't need a policy degree to walk through parts of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, or San Diego, understand that something is not working the way it should. And this is not about attacking homelessness people. It's about asking whether the system is actually solving the problem. Who is affected? Everybody. The person living on the street is affected. The small business owner trying to keep the sidewalk clear is affected. The parent walking their kid to school is affected. The police officer or outreach worker dealing with the same crisis every day is affected. The taxpayer funded program after program is affected. So the question is not whether compassion matters. Of course it matters. The question is whether compassion plus billions in spending is producing results people can actually see. Then Bill Maher brings up cultural issues, and this is where Newsom tries to sound more moderate. He say words matter, as you just heard. He says Democrats can get stuck in identity politics. He says on issues like transgender athletes in sports, common sense is not transphobia. Now, from my perspective, the answer is clearly trying to reposition himself. He knows that many voters, including some Democrats, believe the party went too far on certain cultural issues. But voters are going to ask the obvious question. Is that a real change, or is this just better campaign language? Because it is one thing to say common sense in an interview, and it's another thing to govern that way when activists are pressuring you, when party groups are pressuring you, and when the national spotlight is on you. And this is where the tax conversation matters too. Newsom says he does not support a state-level billionaire tax because capital moves. That is true. Capital does move. Wealthy people can move. Businesses can move. Investment can move. But then he turns around and says he supports taxing the ultra wealthy more at the federal level. So the concern is obvious. If the problem with high taxes is that people leave California, the federal answer is basically to trap the tax base at the national level. Now, supporters of that view will say, hold on, billionaires use loopholes. They borrow against assets. They avoid selling investments. And they do not pay taxes the same way earners do. That is their argument. And there are real debates to be had about capital gains, inheritance rules, and tax fairness. But from a conservative perspective, there is another question that comes first. Why does government always seem to need more money before it proves it can spend the money it already has? Well, right? Why is it not spending the money it already has well? That is the part a lot of regular people are tired of. There's always more taxes, more programs, more agencies, more spending. And then when the results are messy, taxpayers are told to be patient. At some point, people say, no, show me the results first. This is my money, right? So now I want to show you when he speaks on the wealth and the ultra rich and so forth.
You heard what I ended there with, the billionaire tax.
Yeah.
And I know you are against the billionaire tax. So this is interesting to people who don't live here and follow it. They would think, oh, Gavin Newsom, far lefty, he's going to be for the billionaire tax. But you're not.
Well, I think billionaires do need to be taxed more, but just not at the state level. Capital moves. And the challenge with this particular tax is it doesn't include firefighters and teachers. They're left out of the tax. It's one time. And we've already seen dozens and dozens of people leave the state. But my state of mind is crystal clear. At a federal level, the imbalance between the rich and the poor has got to be addressed. And the issue.
You see the contradiction, family? Oh, we've seen dozens of people leave the state. Why is that? But you just shoved all those accolades down Bill Maher's throat. And you're so successful. Why are people leaving? You just told him, I mean, this is critical thinking. Why are we updating talking points instead of just asking questions of what he's speaking? He said it, family. I didn't say it, right? So I'm confused. The talking points, your talking points, where's the substance? You're the one want to utilize talking points, so I'm using my critical thinking and I'm questioning your talking points.
Issue of ultra wealthy folks like Buffett, folks like Bezos, folks like Bloomberg paying 1% to 2% tax. You pay, Bill, a hell of a lot more.
I talked about it last week. They tax the shit out of us, the regular rich.
Yeah.
No one stands up for the regular rich,
I was
Gavin.
standing up. And two at the point. So for the ultra wealthy, we've got to deal with a stepped up basis. We've got to deal with the fact that we're not taxing capital gains at income tax or ordinary income. We got to address the fact they're borrowing against tax about their capital gains, and they're passing on these massive trusts without any taxation to the next generation. All of that needs to happen.
That's beautiful. Why would you not? Well, who would not want to pass an inheritance on to their children? That's the beauty of America. You work hard, but also you pass it on to the next generation because you worked hard to make it easier for the next generation because you leave your children with something, not scrambling and scraping just to survive, but you left them with a foundation based on your hard work to make it easier for the next generation to not work as hard as you had to, but also continue to promote wealth and success and being a productive citizen in America. I don't see nothing wrong with that.
But this particular tax is not.
So let's go deeper, but keep it simple. This is a regular debate about what kind of government people want and what kind of results they expect from the government. The Constitution was not written to create a system where government can promise everything, tax everything, regulate everything, and then tell citizens they should stop asking questions. The founders were not perfect people, but they understood something very important about power. Power needs limits. Government needs checks. Citizens needs rights. And not to mention, a lot of Democrat-led cities and a lot of Democrat-led policies, he talked about how his state of California doesn't have drought, but we have also many more people coming. Well, a lot of people will question many more people like who? Illegals? Just asking a question. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. But citizens need rights, government needs checks, and that is why we have free speech, due process, the right to worship, the right to assemble, the right to petition government, and yes, the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. From my view, the Second Amendment is not about chaos. It is about the basic principle that citizens are not supposed to be helpless and totally dependent on the state. So inheritance is a beautiful thing, but that also comes with a clear line. Our rights protects lawful citizens, not political violence. The founders built a system where we settle political conflict through balance, courts, debate, and constitutional limits. So when we look at California, the question is not just, is this policy liberal or conservative? The question is, does this policy respect the citizen, the taxpayer, the family, the worker, the business owner, and the person trying to build a life? Let's take housing. California has some of the most expensive housing in the country. Supporters of California's approach may say the state is working to build more housing, streamline permits, and deal with decades of shortage. That is fair to mention, but here what it looks like in real life. This is what it looks like. A teacher may work in a city but cannot afford to live near their school. A firefighter may serve a community but has to commute from far away. A young couple may both work full time and still feel like buying a house is a fantasy. A renter may see rent jump again and wonder how long they can stay. That is not an abstract issue. That is life. And when government makes it harder to build, harder to do business, harder to insure property, harder to keep energy prices down, and harder to expand supply, the costs do not just hit rich people. They hit regular families first. The same thing happens with taxes and fees. Politicians love to say they're only going to go after the rich, but in real life, the middle class usually end up feeling the pressure somewhere. Maybe it is higher prices. Maybe it's fewer jobs. Maybe it's a business moving. Maybe it's a landlord passing along cost. Maybe it's a state or a city coming back later with more taxes because their original plan did not raise enough. So when he says, oh, this is a one-time tax. Yeah, they start off with one time, and then what happens later on? Will they expand again? It's nothing. It's no different from a friend where you loan them money and say, hey, man, I need help. Can you just help me for a while? But then you keep giving them money, and then it incentivizes and motivates them around a culture of expecting you to keep giving them handouts. But you thought it was only one time. But that is why conservatives are skeptical about when government says, do not worry, someone else will pay. What happened to people earning what they get? And the more money they got in their pocket, they would be able to pave their own ways, not be government restricted. Because if you're taxing more, then you're basically taxing someone up to their eyeballs. How are they going to have the flexibility to actually thrive and live their American dream to leave their children something? The whole beauty was you work hard for what you get, but you can build something and also leave your kids something and thrive while paving your own way because you have the resource such as money as a tool to then build it your own way. And you don't need nobody. I need you to get out my way. I want to work as hard as I can. And the more flexibility I have, by more money I keep. But history says the bill usually finds its way back to regular people, as I'm saying, with the taxes to the eyeballs. And this is not just California. Look at cities like New York City and Chicago. Zoran Mudami is asking Donald Trump for help and saying that they're in a budget deficit. when former Mayor Eric Adams in New York said that the books have to be green, meaning they have to be in the clear and they can't be negative. So did he really absorb a deficit, or it's not the monies or to the amount of monies he wants to spend for socialist experiments or government run programs, like a government run store he wants $30 million for? So both are major cities with huge talent, huge culture, huge economic power. And we could talk about that all day, bragging like Gavin Newsom and real scrimps. But both also show what happens when public spending, taxes, crime concerns, migrant crisis, housing pressure, and quality of life issues pile up. People may still love those cities, but love does not pay the rent. Love does not fix a budget gap. And love does not make a family feel safe on a train platform. Love does not help a small business owner who is dealing with death, paperwork, taxes, and rising costs all at once. That is the point. Big places can be amazing and still be badly managed in important ways. Two things can be true. California can have world-class technology and still fail regular people on affordability. New York can have unmatched energy and still be too expensive for working families. Chicago can have deep history and strong communities while still facing serious public safety, defunding police and shots, taking away shot spotter to be able to locate when shots ring off, to be there fast enough to be proactive when it comes to public safety, and physical concerns when it comes to spending budgets. And that is why California model matters nationally. It is not because every single thing in California is bad. That would be too simple. The issue is that the same policy pattern shows up again and again and again in heavily Democrat-led cities and policies and states, and high spending, high taxes, heavy regulation, big promises, and then regular people are still dealing with high cost and visible disorder. Supporters will argue that these places are dealing with bigger problems because they are bigger and more diverse and more economically complex. That's a fair opposing view. They will say California leads in innovation, climate policy, worker protections, social issues. They'll say the state is trying to solve problems that other states avoid. Fine. But here's my response. If you're going to claim your motto is the future, then the future has to be livable for normal people, not just tech executives, not just political donors, not just activists, not just people who bought homes 30 years ago. Normal people, the person working a regular job, the person raising kids, the person trying to open up a small business, the person who wants to afford gas, groceries, insurance, rents, and etc. That is who policy should be judged by. And that is where Newsom's national challenge comes in. He could talk about noble and venture capital all day, right? But a voter in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona may say, that is nice, but what does that mean for my life? Can I afford my bills? Are my streets safe? Are my rights protected? Is government spending my money wisely? Are schools focused on education? Is the border being handled responsibly? Is leadership honest when something fails? Most elections are multi-factor, not single issue. Okay? So here's where I land on this. Bill Maher could have pressed him a lot more. But he did say something useful in the interview because he asks kind of questions regular people would like to ask, some questions if they had Gavin Newsom sitting across from them. He did not just let the big California sales pitch go by without challenging it about the train. He said it about gas prices, rent, policies that felt too far left. What about the billionaire tax that you guys seen? And from my perspective, those are exactly the questions any national candidate should have to actually answer, because Gavin Newsom didn't answer when it came to the question of explaining about the whole thing when it came to the billionaires tax. He didn't answer it. He just said we had to talk about wording matters and update our talking points. He didn't talk about the railroad project either and how it's costing so much money. But Newsom is good at talking. And not because we need to attack anybody personally, but because leadership has to be tested against results. He's good at talking, that's obvious. He knows how to sound confident. He knows how to shift from criticism to statistics, as you guys seen. He knows how to say California is the envy of the world. But the average voter is not living inside a campaign speech. The average voter is living inside a budget. That is the difference. A politician says the economy is strong. A voter say my rent went up. A politician said the state leads in innovation. A voter says my gas is too expensive. A politician says homelessness is improving. A voter say I still see the problem every day. Right? So that is why trust has to be earned. Trust comes from what you show, not just what you say. So what is the solution? In my view, the first step is basic honesty. Stop pretending every criticism is just a talking point. If the train is too expensive, admit it and put hard limits on the project. If a program is not working, audit it in public. If homelessness spending is not producing results, track where the money goes and tie funding to measurable outcomes. If housing is too expensive, cut the rules that make building slower and more costly. If taxes are too high, stop acting like the only answer is to take more money from someone else. Start asking how to spend less, waste less, and deliver better. If cultural policies are out of step with regular people, say clearly where the line is and protect fairness, dignity, and common sense at the same time. And on constitutional rights, be clear, protect free speech, protect due process, protect the Second Amendment, condemn political violence from every direction, treat citizens like adults, not problems to be managed. That is the kind of conversation the country needs more of. Not yelling, not insults, not pretending one side has all the answers, just real questions, real accountability, and real results. Because if Gavin Newsom and any other governor wants to run for president, then their record is fair game. California's crimes are fair to mention, and California's failures are fair to question. That is not unfair. That is democracy. So the bigger lesson here is simple. A state can be rich and still be unaffordable, powerful and still poorly managed, famous and still frustrating for the people who live there. And if a leader wants to sell that model to the rest of America, the rest of America has every right to look at the price tag and say, explain this first. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Newsom can sell the California model to middle America? Or do you think the cost of living, the train, taxes, homelessness, and cultural issues make that too hard to overcome? Keep it respectful, but tell me where you stand. Like the video, share, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one, family. Peace.